So we've gone through a couple different correlations, right? But the bottom line is to remember that what they're really here to help us do is identify potential support and resistance areas and confirm these support and resistance areas, because the correlations are not tick for tick. Okay, let's talk about the quality of the correlations. They're not the same across the different pairs, and they're certainly not tick for tick. For example, taking a look at this Canadian dollar chart. Here's the day of the high on the crude oil. I'm sorry, on the Canada, and the day of the low on crude. Do they pretty much sync up? We'll take a peek here. Yeah, they pretty much do sync up. I've just drawn a plumb line basically through the high in the Canada, and there's your low in crude. So yeah, they do basically sync up. Okay, are they always going to? No, because take a look. We actually didn't make a low on that same day. We made a low the day before on the Canada. See? We have a low on the day of the high in the dollar Canada, but the actual low was just before that. See that? So am I going to make an assumption like, oh, crude oil leads to Canada? No. Let's not get carried away. What I do want to show is that these correlations don't necessarily move for tick, but there is an impact, because what else impacts the dollar Canada? Obviously the strength or weakness of the dollar. Obviously the internals of the Canadian economy. It's not that I can synthesize everything down into the Canada based upon what happens in crude. No economy is that small or limited. Okay? Does the crude oil market have a huge impact on what happens to the loonie? Sure. But I can't say that everything boils down to the crude oil market for the Canada. There's, like I said, going to be internal economic numbers that affect the Canadian economy. There are going to be numbers that affect the US dollar, and in turn the relationship between the dollar and the Canada, which is why before any other correlation, it's really important that we understand where the dollar is heading, where it's been, and where it's likely to find support and resistance, because that's going to affect all the other pairs. So when I'm looking at dollar movement, and I'm looking at the Euro US dollar, or the Swissy, or the cable, I want to know the relationship. For the Euro and the cable, it's inverse. For the Swissy, it's sympathetic. For the dollar yen, let's take a peek at the dollar yen, because that one's a little bit different. The dollar yen actually has a terrific correlation to the Dow. So let me overlay the dollar yen and the Dow here. And right now we know what's been happening on the Dow. I'm going to use the Dow mini here, the YM contract. But we know what's been going on in the Dow. Unbelievable volatility. Well, that unbelievable volatility in the Dow has been some serious volatility in the dollar yen as well. Look at this. This is the Dow in green and red overlaid with the dollar yen in black and white. Look how closely they move together. Not necessarily in scope, but certainly sympathetic in direction. Yeah? You see that? I mean, certainly sympathetic in direction. But I squeezed more data in here. This is basically just a little bit over, just about a year here on the dollar yen. Is the correlation fixed? No. No. Take a peek here. This may look like they're moving opposite one another in this span between, say, late February and June. But take a peek. Again, the green is your Dow. Your Dow mini in this situation. And the black and white is your dollar yen. Are they both heading up? Yes. Has the scope changed? Yeah, because what happened here? The dollar yen started to sink a whole lot quicker than the Dow did. See this? It's the dollar yen in black and white. It started to sink more rapidly than the Dow did. The Dow sunk a little bit, but not as much. When the dollar yen recovered, heading back up again, you can see it did so much more dramatically because it sunk more dramatically. Did the dollar yen and the Dow move together? Yes, but not in scope, only sympathetic in direction. So these things don't always stay, attached at the hip, and you got to understand that. But more often than not, and this is just 1 year's look back, you can see how good the correlation typically is. So if I'm going to have a wide-ranging volatile day on the Dow to the downside or to the upside, there's going to be a sympathetic relationship on the dollar yen. So this gives you some insight not only into potential volatility, but direction, support, resistance. All right? So let's look at this specifically with the Dow by itself.